Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. The town's comprehensive plan includes many varied areas: wetlands, suburban, the mall, Central Avenue, but one of the most interesting areas lies up around the Mohawk River. Perhaps not everyone knows exactly how much land we have on the Mohawk River and what the problems are. What we're going to do today, we have two guests, Maggie Vinciguerra and town planner, senior planner, Kevin DeLaughter. We're going to be discussing the Mohawk River area and work that's being done in that area to make it better. Want to welcome you to the show, Maggie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Richard.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We were kind of joking. Some people may not even know that there's a river, you said, beyond the swimming pool.
At the town park.
At the town park.
Yes, we hear that.
And yet it's a beautiful river, and anybody who has studied history knows that Albany is where it is because of these rivers and the falls. What got you into working on this? I know you've been working a long time. Could you give us an idea about the project scope and how it started?
Well, it started for me when I found an article in the Times-Union that indicated the town had secured a grant from the Department of State to work with the Glenwood Center from Cold Spring to conduct what's known as a countryside exchange here in Colonie. And I had had an experience with the countryside exchange myself previously, and so I called the town to ask what it was about, and because I live very close to the Mohawk River, I found that very interesting personally. But my experience with the countryside exchange was that this is a very intense planning workshop and very unusual approach to planning that certainly was not like anything I had seen here in the town. I've lived here since 1972, so I knew it was going to be a watershed in terms of public participation and a major change in process. Yes, yeah. So I was very excited by it, and I called Phil Pearson, who was then the director, but Kevin and volunteered my time to help out. But Kevin can tell you how they got to that point, because I think it's interesting that the town went to discuss the Mohawk instead of another part of the town.
I think Maggie's been working with this so intensely that I associated it with her, and yet you were here before Maggie was. And
Yeah, we actually started working on acquiring the state grant probably a couple of years before Maggie got involved.
Right.
There was a recognition in our department that we have about 10 miles of waterfront on the Mohawk River. There are significant areas of open land on and adjacent to the river that we really felt was kind of a jewel in the rough along the riverfront, and that we ought to take a look at that area and what direction it should take in the future. So at about the same time we had that germ of a thought, Phil Pearson went through a program at the Glenwood Center and put two and two together, and we decided to partner with the Glenwood Center and put together the grant application. And as I said, through a couple of years process, we're finally successful in getting the grant and initiating the program.
now, you said Glenwood Center, and what was the name, the whole name? The Glenwood, or what was the grant's name?
The Countryside Exchange.
Countryside Exchange. That
program.
word countryside is evocative of almost England.
Well, it is, yes. In fact, the Countryside Exchange involves a team of professional planners and other types of backgrounds, tourism, economic development, who are from Great Britain and Canada, Alaska, other parts of the United States, all who have some type of experience to answer the questions that people locally would be posing to them. So that puts it back on the community to develop the questions that they need to have answered prior to the Countryside Exchange team being assembled. So there's a lot of research that is done locally in the town by volunteers and by the planning department to prepare for.
I think
for
that was a unique part of the process,
Yes.
that it was really a ground-up, community-based process, where typically planning in most areas, including the town, is more of a top-down professional planners initiative, and go from there. But this was something that very much involved the community. The Glenwood Center really was the facilitator. You know, once we put together the local organizing committee of primarily town volunteers, interested citizens and residents, the Glenwood Center did training as to how to conduct the program. They helped us generate the questions that we wanted to have addressed, and they put together the team of professionals with expertise to deal with those issues.
And those were local people?
The
professionals that...
No, that was the international team
I
that
see.
the center
I see.
selected to address the questions that we put forward. But for the most part, the Glenwood Center people faded into the background. You know, they got the program running, and even our town professional staff, to a large extent, faded into the background. And a lot of the heavy lifting on the Countryside Exchange, and even going forward, has been done by volunteers.
And there's one right here.
Yes, that's right. The process of announcing to the public that we were going to go through this Countryside Exchange brought out at our first meeting about 110 people. We were very, very surprised, and it stayed that strong right through the first 2 years that we were working. And now it's segmented into areas of special interest, like the public access to the river might be one, management of some of the other issues on the river might be another committee that people are working on.
Well, that kind of leads us into some of the issues, but before we do that, let's show people where this is. We'll put a graphic up on the screen, and maybe you can describe the size and the length of it. I was kind of surprised when I looked at one of your photos that even though I've been on the river and I've rowed my little inflatable boat around, it's got such a bend. It must be an interesting shoreline.
Yeah, as I said, we have about 10 miles of river frontage. It is at the northern end of town, runs from the town of Niskayuna on the west to the city of Cohoes, just above the Cohoes Falls on the east. The large bend in the river is the bout. And bout is Dutch for bend, as I understand.
Thank you, Kevin. That's good. So how far south does the land go that you're looking at? Obviously, the other side is now Saratoga County, so we're not interested in that, or are we?
Well, we did look at for purposes of our study, we looked at the area inland within the town of Colonie,
Right.
and to varying depths. At the western end, we went as far south as Troy-Schenectady Road, Route 7.
Now, people can see the graphic on the screen of the shaded area that is the area you're looking at, but about how deep does that go, to give some perspective? 500 feet or a mile?
I'd say it probably averages somewhere between a mile and 2 miles.
That's much
particularly
bigger than I thought.
as we get to the eastern portion, the bike path is the southerly boundary,
Right.
and
Right.
the bike path crosses Route 9. Considerable distance south of the Crescent Bridge
That's
was at the town line. As far as looking at areas beyond the town, the study that we've done doesn't specifically do that, but we certainly recognize that we have an impact on our neighbors, and they have an impact on us, and we definitely are interested in working with our neighbors as we go forward with this process.
And we made sure also to communicate with the towns on the other side of the river, on the northern side of the river, and the city of Cohoes as we were going through this process, and invited them to attend meetings whenever they wanted to do that. So I think that was important. And we did have a follow-up meeting with municipalities as well about a year and a half ago with the Department of State to just do an update of where everybody was in terms of their river planning and keep the communication open. It's very important because it's our viewshed and we're their viewshed, and so it's important to keep these issues in front.
And the political issues are very complicated, I'm not talking about government I'm talking about individuals, working with individuals, and this person has land here and somebody else has a farm there, and how do we work with all the people that are connected?
Well, that's where we started with the local organizing committee for the Countryside Exchange. People came because of issues in their backyard. And it became very clear after a couple of meetings that if we worked together on the broader issues, we would be able to protect our own interests as we went forward.
I see.
So then I think that it took a little while for some folks to understand how that process would work, because it takes longer. But that in the long run, you know, it's certainly beginning to work now, and I think it's getting more support for that. Yeah.
Well, the town's over 100 years old, so taking a long time right now may seem like a lot, but it's probably not in the bigger
Yeah.
perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go into some of the actual issues involved. What kind of land is there, for example? I mentioned farms, but I don't really know how much would be farmland and how many houses and things like that.
The study area has a mix of uses, particularly along the waterfront. There is quite a bit of open land, much of which is state-designated wetland. We do have the town park that occupies a considerable portion of the river frontage. We have other town facilities, including our sewer and water treatment plants and the town landfill. And there are several residential areas that initially developed as camps on the waterfront, and in recent years have been substantially improved. A lot of the old camps have been either replaced or remodeled with more modern structures.
Mm-hmm.
How about the water? What can we hope for there? Are there going to be beaches? Will people be able to see more of the water?
We are hoping that we've just completed a public access strategy with the University at Albany's planning design studio students, their master's degree students. And this is a consistent study with what the Countryside Exchange found, what is in the waterfront revitalization study that the town and Mohawk River Community Partners wrote together. And there is a need for public access to the water, viewshed access as well as physical access.
In addition to what we have now, which
Well,
is,
there's
I guess, not much.
not much, no.
Okay.
There's very little public access. You can launch a boat at the town park during certain hours, but beyond that, there are no hand launches, there are no other public launches on the
Okay.
whole 10.2 miles. So that's an issue for people. And then there's a growing need a growing interest in having the ability to launch kayaks and canoes. You can put in informally in certain places, but it's not, there is no formal public area for recreation that way.
So I mentioned, we have a bike path. I mentioned getting into the water, but maybe you could, in a more organized way, kind of describe the uses that we would like to make of the river area. I mean, what are the goals, I guess, starting at what we have?
One of the things that we have these wonderful, wonderful resources. This is a beautiful part of the river. It's not been developed. It hasn't been, like many other rivers, it hasn't been industrialized and then abandoned. It is pristine in a lot of places. However, that beautiful resource is right next to a very heavily used recreational resource, and there isn't communication between those two. Then you go farther south and you have neighborhoods that were built before and during the time and since the bike path was acquired, bike path having been a railroad bed before.
Uh-huh.
So it makes for a very interesting route through the town and along the S-curves and the view sheds. However, there isn't communication between the bike path and the neighborhoods either for very much of the bike path. So for a lot of our residents to use any of these any of these wonderful resources, you have to drive to get there. And when you drive, there's very few places to park. And so the issues become the public access, the amenities along the bike trail, and view sheds that could be cut a little bit so that we can see a little bit more of the river from certain places along the bike path. That would be some of our goals. We're talking about recreation for the most part, which does have an economic benefit. We don't have a boat rental area near near this part of the river because of the lack of public access, I'm sure. We also don't have a bike shop in this part of the bike trail, which is very, very heavily used. And so there could be some very good economic benefit, I think, if we develop the resource recreationally a little bit more. There's also the opportunity to do what's known as a blue trail, which would be a kayaking, canoeing
I was a
trail.
little slow. I was looking at the bike path thing.
So it would be possible to do some small improvements that would allow for more kayaking.
I know.
stops.
I read in one of the plans that there are problems with using boats on the water because they dredge only the parts that are really used for shipping, leaving the rest to accumulate weeds and silt.
And there are serious issues with river management, dealing with siltation of the riverfront and the invasive weed growth, particularly water chestnut, that if you look at the river anytime during the warmer months, you'll see that large portions of it are just weed choked. And that is an issue with boat access, even with canoes and kayaks. It's pretty much impossible to paddle out from the shore to the navigation channel where it is dredged and more open. And that is one of the components of the current grant that we're working on with the Department of State funding, to take a look at those siltation and weed issues to try to get a handle on how we might try to deal
So
with
we don't
those.
even know how to do it, much less need the money to do it.
It is a complex issue, and it obviously goes well beyond the town borders. We are in a river environment. We're pretty much at the lower reaches of the Mohawk River watershed. So what comes
So is
to
it
us
common
is
to
an enormous area of the state that feeds into the town.
I
Yeah.
see.
And the weed problem is managed in other places in the state, we know. So there are...
That's good to know.
Yeah, there are ways to success. It takes time and it takes, consistent effort to keep public access areas open, but and
Is
a
it just a
commitment.
continual, like weeding the garden, or is it something
It's
where you
something
can...
like that, yes,
Okay.
depending on what it is. And we have water
Uh-huh.
chestnuts, which are most very, very stubborn. So
Okay.
it does take a long time to keep an area open. And with a river, you have moving water, different from a lake, and it is even more complex because of that. But there are volunteer programs in different communities along the Hudson River, as well as Saratoga Lake, Kinderhook Lake, that have been successful. And so we're looking at those as models.
Yeah, it's not something we think we can eradicate because we do have a
Right.
constant reseeding from upriver areas, but it's something we think over time we can manage.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, you said 110 people attended the first meeting, and many of them were there because of their own interest,
Mhm.
based on, okay, this is my situation, and I'm connected to the river.
Yes.
Before we look at the rest of us who really don't live there and just think it's the most beautiful place and hope that it can be preserved, what kind of interest were there in these 110 people?
To continue to work on the project?
What brought people there?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with using the bike path, not necessarily living along the river. We had people from other communities
Uh-huh.
there too. A lot of people who lived along the river did come because they have issues with the weeds and that sort of thing that directly affects them. But people who are using the bike path on a regular basis and people who live upland and are not able to have public access were very interested too. We also have the development community is interested in what we would be doing, of course, and the local Chamber of Commerce. Those sorts of folks have been involved with us from the beginning.
Yeah, I would say, there are limited opportunities for development or redevelopment on private property along the riverfront, and one of our goals is where we do have those opportunities, we look at uses that are compatible and will contribute to the quality of the environment that we're looking for on the waterfront.
So it's a little bit like the rest of the town plan. You're hoping to at least know where we want to end up, where we want to go, so that when you get a proposal, you can guide it towards fulfilling our needs, the community's needs.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Well, Mohawk River Community Partners hasn't been involved as the planning department is with those sorts of things. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I noticed that it's Inc. as well, the Mohawk Community Partners Inc.
That's right.
So
It was a recommendation of the Countryside Exchange to form a not-for-profit corporation to continue the work with the town, and rather than just stay as a committee. And that really, because when you form a not-for-profit, you are developing your mission statement and bylaws and working as a corporation would, and therefore you have a way to guide the work that gets done by the organization. Whereas in many communities, when they do planning with volunteers, that often falls away after a certain period of time when people become disinterested or don't have that mission statement to bind them to continue the work.
well, it sounds like your goal, though, is very compelling. And
We
to
think
me,
so.
that would really be the driving force to stay involved. It's if you've been on the river and you enjoy just looking at it.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't take much more than taking people on a tour. And,
Right.
and we did that to keep people interested. We did what we called history talks and nature walks on the bike path to talk to people about a lot of the issues. And we're having an annual event now that brings, last year we had about 400 people attend in the town park, and we're going to be doing that again this year. So those kinds of things keep the issues in front of people.
Well, since you mentioned that event, I know it is coming up in June, but I forgot.
It's June 9th.
June 9th.
It's our third annual River Fest, and we expect this is going to be bigger and better than ever.
Oh,
It's in
is
the
it
town
gonna-
park.
It's in the town park, in the pavilion on the river, and we have kayaking demos all day long, which are a lot of fun, and a lot of educational
That
programming.
means you
and
definitely
fun.
need your swimsuit.
Yes, you do. Well, you don't have to, but you may get wet. Just be prepared to get wet. But that is a lot of fun for folks. And there'll be music and vendors and entertainment.
Okay, and the hours of that, June, say it again.
June 9th.
June 9th.
It's a Saturday?
It's a
or-
Saturday.
It's a Saturday. We start at 8 o'clock in the morning with a bird walk, and
Ooh,
yes, very nice.
that might get me there.
And then at 9:30 there's a 5K run on the woodland trails, which is a different experience for runners. So we had 60 people in that last year that was the first time we did it, so
Wow.
it was a lot of fun.
That is cross-country.
Yes, and then the other activities, educational activities, start at 10. Right.
Well, since we're doing that, let's talk about this Name the Park just a little bit. I'm not looking for hints about how good the entries are. I've been thinking, but I don't have anything.
Well, again, one of the recommendations from the Countryside Exchange was that what is currently officially the town park be renamed to better reflect its location along the river, and in part to reduce confusion with the crossings, which a lot of people now equate with the town park. So we've since the Countryside Exchange report was issued, we've been looking for ways to develop a new and hopefully better name for the park, and the contest is the way that we've settled on to make that happen.
I wish you luck. I hope the entries are good, because I was trying in Mohawk and Colonie, and the same thing doesn't leave me a lot.
I'll just give you a hint that people have been very creative.
Very good.
Yes.
Creative was the word I was thinking.
Yes.
There have been some interesting entries.
There have been, and there have been many. There have been hundreds of them. So
Wonderful.
yes, we're very pleased with that. So
I'm trying to get a handle on, now what would you say has been accomplished so far in terms of the project?
well, after we did the study and wrote the revitalization plan, I mean, that is an effort that's usually handed to a consultant in communities. And rather than do that, we, as a group of volunteers together with the planning staff, wrote the revitalization strategy, and Kevin guided that process, and that was accepted by the Department of State. It then became part of the comprehensive plan.
So the whole thing, pretty
The
much?
whole thing,
Beautiful.
yes, yeah. So that was a really great accomplishment to be working with the town that way. This has been a great experience for volunteers to work with a town department. It really has been. It's been a great deal of support, and getting a study like that done, a plan done, is really good. It's an action plan too. It's not something you just put on the shelf. And so, following that, we identified several different things to take a look at. And the town applied for another grant, which is what we are implementing now. And that includes taking a look at gateway projects the comprehensive plan also talks about gateway projects. And so the gateways to the River District area on the western side are the former water treatment facility. And we're looking at that as a project that Mohawk River Community Partners would take on. And we plan to do a feasibility study on that site. And then on the eastern gateway, it's the Crescent Bridge Route 9 area as you're going through town or coming from the north.
And that would be probably on Route 9 or?
Yes, right on Route 9.
Either side of Route 9, we have an existing small park known as Freddy's Park on the east side of the Crescent Bridge. And
that's on the river?
Yes.
That's
It
right
has
on
to
the river,
be.
yes.
It's right on the
Yes.
river. Mhm.
And it happens to be at the point where the original Erie Canal crossed the river
Right.
by aqueduct. There are remnants of the aqueduct
Yes.
abutments in the park.
So that was actually a self-contained, I'm getting excited, that was actually a self-contained way for ships to be moved?
The original canal was not
Yeah.
on the river. It was a separate channel, and before the river was dammed,
I see, I
and
see.
you had the water
Right.
depth that's necessary, the canal did follow a separate course.
What do you hope to see happen in the next year or two? What could you use some help with?
Well, we could certainly use volunteers.
Okay.
That's always a very good thing. If anyone is interested in volunteering to write grants, that's always good too.
How would you want them to contact the organization?
They could contact by email.
So we'll put that up.
Okay.
Go ahead and say what,
It's colonie.org/Mohawk.
easy enough.
That's our website.
That is.
Yes, and then
Oh.
the email is mohawk@colonie.org.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
simple.
Right. Now, the Countryside Exchange Report and the Revitalization Strategy and Action Plan are all up on the website. Kevin has put those up too. So.
And they're interesting to read, so I would encourage anyone to read those and find out more about what you're doing.
Good.
We're almost out of time. I just want to push a little bit further. What would you hope might happen in the next 4 years? I mean, if you thought everything went really well, what might you be able to see?
Do you want me to start with this?
Sure.
Okay. I would like to see that this particular part of the town is recognized for its special nature, that it is a very distinct and different and special place, and that we have worked to identify it, to interpret it, and to preserve it, so that others who follow us can enjoy it.
I think that's a great goal. You used the term, and I don't know if we can get it back. My memory is sometimes not what it should be. I don't know if it ever was. But you described the area, the Mohawk River area. Is that what you said? Or
I've been calling it the River District.
yes,
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, we're thinking about, it's not just me, but there's a group of us who are talking about interpretation and recognition through a very simple sign program that would direct people from the main roads, Route 7 and Route 9, and also identify historic features where the ferries crossed, where the aqueduct is, or is what's left there, and then interpretive signs that talk about our history and the Shakers who farmed all the way out to the islands and things like that. The French and Indian
interesting,
War.
too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they had a tin shop. They raised the broom corn. They're famous for having invented the flat broom, and they raised the broom corn in this area.
I have to just ask a follow-up with that. I can't help it. We have the Ann Lee Shaker settlement,
Yes.
and there was also a connection to Wolf Road.
Mhm.
Some of the people who lived on Wolf Road actually joined the Shaker colony.
Mhm.
But did this go that far north?
We did include Anley Pond, the Shaker site, and
I see.
Shaker Creek as part of what we were doing, and the airport as well.
Okay.
And eventually what we'd like to see is have the bike path connect back up to the Shaker site, Anley Pond, and eventually to the crossings. So that,
Fantastic.
yeah, that would be a goal.
And that hopefully would be a short-term goal.
Yes.
We do have a bike path that was constructed along with the recent reconstruction of Albany Shaker Road that runs from Ann Lee Pond up to Route 7 at British American Boulevard. And as we look at potential development along the north side of Troy-Schenectady Road in that vicinity, we're looking at opportunities to bring the bike path down to River Road and from there to the existing bike path.
It's wonderful. I want to encourage people to go to the website and to look more. And
Great.
I hope wish you good luck with the naming contest. I saw that in the newspaper, so
Thank you.
that was good too.
Thank you. It's fun.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show, and hope to see you next time. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.